what does sustainability mean in ITC and to you and the role that you're now running?
Thanks for first of all inviting me here. Sustainability means a lot of things, I think, not only for ITC, but I think as it is of course it's a whole spectrum of things. It covers economic, social, governance, environment, everything inclusive. But at ITC, I'll talk about what are some of the material things which ITC looks at more closer lens than other issues. One is of course energy, because climate is a very important aspect of any business, I think, and that's why decarbonization takes a center stage, and hence we have a commitment to have at least 50% of our entire energy coming from renewable sources by 2030, and happy to share that last year we have already reached 42%, and hence maybe we can be looking very comfortably at 50% by 2030, or even advance our commitments. The second aspect which is very important for us is on our we are a large FMCG company, so we have got EPR responsibilities, because most of our products get marketed in plastic packages, and some of it in the multi-layer plastics, which is very, very difficult to recycle actually. So that is another important area for us. And last year for the first time we collected more than 54,000 of plastic waste, and we became plastic 54,000 metric tons of plastic waste, and across the country, and we for the first time we became plastic neutral, because we were we collected much more than we actually used for our packaging products. The third important area for us is the whole farm value chain, because for most of the ITC businesses the input material comes from farms, and that is why working with the farmers and working for them and making them technologies available, or making the whole or socializing the whole concept of sustainability, and whether it is regenerative farming or whether it is creating increasing their farm incomes, etc., becomes very, very important. And you may have heard about this very, very iconic kind of a case study from India, which is eChopal. At least I read it for the first time as the only Indian case study when I was doing my executive MBA 2 decades ago. So really farmers for us are our key stakeholders, and working with them, working for them is another very key figure. And of course that encapsulates things like water, about creating alternates to farming, and working with them now for climate resilient agriculture, bringing into for the regenerative farming practices, etc. So these are and of course there's as part of energy, then there's something called the whole buildings which are there. So bringing energy efficiency in all our buildings. I think in India we are the first one to have the first commercial building which was platinum rated LEED certified buildings, and in our portfolio we have a hotels division. So this division has been leading the way for the building sector. Very happy to share that in India, in the world actually, ITC Gardenia, which is at Bangalore, it was the first, ITC Windsor, it became the first hotel in the world to be zero carbon LEED certified hotel.
What does that mean?
It means that it is a zero carbon hotel actually. So, and it's certified by the LEED rating agency in the world. So, these are some of the important pillars of our sustainability outlook. Of course, we need to extend this outlook to far more newer things which are becoming very important, but I'll talk about it later.
Right. So tell me about, so you talked about 2 or 3 things. So one is of course the energy, and which is linked to buildings and hotels being big users. So that's one kind of this thing. You also talked about plastic, and you said that there's a lot of recycling, and the third leg being agriculture. So I'm assuming most of it lies in these 3 legs. So in agriculture, can you tell us what's changed in so while you've continued to have relationships with farmers through eChopal, what has changed in the way that you can maybe give us an illustration that exemplifies what is changing in the relationship in the context of climate? So or rather, what is it that you do today that's different from what you would do, let's say, even a decade ago, given the fact that we are now more climate conscious?
See, e-Chopal, when it came, of course, it came as a digital intervention at that point of time when, you know, most of the households even did not have a lap at a desktop or anything like that. But it actually, at the core of it was bringing the farmers closer to the information system so that they had good access to what was happening outside in the world. And so it was mainly driven by economics, which is like their better pricing, because always they were going to mandis and there were intermediaries who were kind of, you know, taking the bulk of the cut, and then they were not being left. So it was creating a platform which was bringing value to them and probably removing that intermediary layer which was there. So that was the idea of e-Chopal when it came. It has now metamorphosed into a ITC Mars. It's actually a mega market at the something, but it's largely a phygital system where it is a plug and play kind of a model. And now at the heart of it is to give, is to build capacity and capability, as well as you know, provide this platform where others can also come and plug and play with their plug and play model and create value to one set of stakeholder, which is farmers. And now these the information or dissemination or the collaboration which is happening is largely to do with in the space of climate, because and bringing those regenerative climate practices into practice, bringing basically building the capacity and also bringing them closer to the technology providers. It will not be ITC essentially, but it will be many others, you know, some of the startups who were there. So they could just come and, you know, this is the audience which is available for them. So this is where it has, the whole e-Chopal has actually the metamorphosis has happened, which is now looking at creating value or bringing value on things which are much more relevant today.
Right. So, you know, as a large company, how do you set a sustainability agenda that's keeping track, or rather keeping pace with what's happening in the environment itself, if that's the way you do it?
Of course, that's the way we do it. Only thing, it's much more challenging because we have 13 different businesses and multiple set of stakeholders. But the process that I think any large corporate will also have is like looking at your stakeholder as your key input for devising your strategy, right? And ITC has always kind of walked the talk for the triple bottom line approach, and it started about 3 decades ago. And that has only got strengthened now, and sustainability is now one of the key pillars of strategy. So, and that's how the whole sustainability 2.0 strategy has come into place, and that's where all the whole set of commitments have come into fore. And as I said, so basically you have platforms or you have avenues where you listen to your stakeholders, you collate it back together as set of material issues, and then you probably do a plotting of what is the intersection of your business and the stakeholders who matter to you, and then, you know, draw out your strategy and then, you know, work towards that. So I think that's how we go about it.
Right. And what's, if you could, you know, again, I'm looking for illustrations. So what are the areas where you feel the impact is much greater given the kind of changes that we're seeing in climate? So, I mean, is there something that you've done which you perhaps did not know would have greater impact? So it could be interacting with farmers and giving them a certain knowledge input, which has caused them to fundamentally change the way they do things in maybe either water conservation or some other way of crop management. Similarly, it could be in buildings, though I think the sense I'm getting is most of what you're doing has been happening gradually for a while. So is there something that is more sudden, new, dramatic?
I think, as you rightly said, I think most of it has been happening gradually, and it's a gradual kind of as and when, as you progressed, you had these learnings and you've tried to, whatever strength you had created, and you have tried to leverage that and then create far greater impact. So whether it was the watershed management, the idea of watershed management again was like it started from the need that some of your agri value chains like tobacco or pulpwood are in kind of a water stress zones, and that's why you started working with the farmers. And the model here is different, that you don't invest in creating those watersheds, but you actually try to work with the farmers and create that ownership, that they take the ownership of these watersheds, and they have created such a large impact. I mean, while as ITC, how we have benefited is that it has ensured, you know, the availability of crop, which is so central to our business throughout, apart from creating those lifelong relationships. And it also helps that, you know, as of now we have about more than 3 times of the watersheds are there created than we actually use as part of our 13 businesses, and we have a commitment to create more than 5 times of these kind of watersheds across India. That's one example. I'll also probably what has created much more impact is it's much more dramatic and has started something new is our you know, climate smart model villages that we have started in a small catchment around our tobacco catchment area. But we plan to, if we understand, because see, this is also a very new space, and
Sure.
you really don't understand how it is working. And also in India we have very small farm holders, and to make them understand that, you know, even if they are paying, they have to pay upfront in this season something more as part of a regenerative farm practice, how does it mean much more benefit for a longer term of period. So I think that's something that we have just started, and of course it needs to be scaled up significantly across India, but we have started in a small catchment, and we have leveraged all the relationship that we have created and all our knowledge which is there, but this is a way to go. I think the other thing which was much more dramatic and happened suddenly was the whole EPR thing on plastic, and as our foods business is growing, I think that's where that's one responsibility which comes more as a regulation has been increasing. But then again, I think I mentioned that 2016 this whole EPR came, and at that point of time at least the corporates which were in this sector were quite, I mean, they thought, how is it going to be done, because there was no ecosystem, there were no recyclers, there were you know, the whole waste, even the segregation of waste in India was not happening. But I think the success story, and today India is collecting, one of the countries which is collecting 70% of the plastic waste. It's not insignificant considering the, you know, the tonnage which actually as a size of the country gets collected. But then solutions were found, so, and everyone worked together. It was, of course, corporates had to fund, but then there were policies which helped, then there were startups which came, then there were NGOs, and you know, whole lot of things. But I think this is something which really you know, something very impactful. And I like to mention here that ITC was working in this space, has been working traditionally in this space. There's a program called you know, value out of waste, but this was being done by the papers division, because paper traditionally has been using a lot of recycled papers. So just to, you know, reduce their cost, you would like to use some amount of recycled papers, and that's where this you know, vertical was created out of the papers division. But it got, you know, scaled up, and it now 1/3 of this 54,000 tons which I talked about comes from the WOW program, which runs in some, you know, most of the southern states it is running. And what it does, it ensures ethical and inclusive models for all the stakeholders, and at the heart of it is the, you know, the last person on the value chain on this is the person who's collecting, your garbage collector. And how are you ensuring that the value also gets transferred to that person, right? So that's the whole I think the inclusivity part of ITC, which is at the heart of it, and our tagline is Sab Saath Bade, where, you know, inclusivity is actually embedded into it, and that's our hallmark, I think. And then of course there's a Swachh model which is there in Pune, which is but focused not only on a very specific type of plastic, which is the multi-layer plastic. So all your chips packet etc., they come with some kind of a silver lining, and it's very difficult to recycle.
Yeah, there's plastic and metal and plastic.
And so it's called multi-layered plastic, and it's very difficult to recycle, and that's why we are doing we have partnered with Swachh in Pune to create that ecosystem actually. because there was no incentive for the garbage picker to actually collect MLP. They were actually throwing it into the landfill, but the whole idea was to bring it back. And we have tried to then create technologies for using MLP. So we are getting the MLP and then finding the technology to actually recycle the MLP, and then of course taking it back into the value chain. So that's something that we have worked upon, and it had happened very suddenly, but yes.
Right. So last couple of questions. So one is when you think about benchmarks, and I mean global benchmarks, so what do you think of when it comes? And when I say benchmark, I mean it in the context of a large organization, company, manufacturing, services, hotels, trying to reach or set a new standard or achieve a standard. Second is that as you do that, what are you setting for yourself as your own targets, and how do you personally visualize that? So for example, would you let's say every day, would you think of some number? You say, okay, I've got to reach that index, or we've got to reach that index, because that would mean that we are up there when it comes to the most ideal carbon-free corporate citizen existence.
Well, if you say, I have worked 29 years in Tata's, right?
Tata
And then
Steel.
I came, Tata Steel, and then I have come to ITC. And I think it's not only about carbon. And when you look at sustainability, because I represent sustainability as a profession, so while carbon is at the forefront and it's at the center of most of the discussions, but I think sustainability is far more larger subject. And that is why, while when I had taken a decision to really look at other options, I kind of finally, came to ITC, because I think sustainability also means it should create value for everyone, right? And it's not only looking at your own business making profits, but also or some important stakeholders creating value. I think it's creating value for the last person on the value chain, and that's where I think, at least I think I've seen it happen in Tata's, and where the whole holding of the firm is such that it is, it's not Ratan Tata or anyone who's getting richer. It's actually the trust, and then that trust does so much of work in the whole country, and has created so much of value for each individual. In this country.
In the community,
In this country, actually, we don't realize the work that those two trusts have done for for more than a century now for the country, whether it's academia or it's medical or research. So, and I think that's where at least the ITC ethos matched, where it's inclusivity, and it's about creating value for everyone, and not only looking at your own returns or one important stakeholder.
So you're saying
returns.
Sustainability to you as a benchmark is when everyone in the value chain benefits
it's creating value for everyone. So whether it's carbon, it's plastic, or it's about farm, or it's about anything else, I think it's important to create value for everyone. And that's the business case also, and that's where that's where you create a distinction, and that's where you create a recall value. So I think
Right. Okay, last question. So what would you like to take away from a convening like this?
One, this was I think after post-COVID, my first in-person thing. So it was good to meet with some of the old-timers. And also, I think I just caught one phrase which John Deere mentioned in his first, in the first half of the session, which is like, it's far more cheaper to work for climate and work for Earth, and it's much more expensive to ruin it. But that realization or internalization needs to happen for a larger segment, that it's far more cheaper actually, and we are not thinking of, probably the decarbonization bit has got socialized and had got center stage, but there are far more greater ramifications as for human beings, for this earth, because of climate, that we are not thinking, and we are not putting a price to it, and that's why probably we are not actioning upon it. But it's a very deep message that I'm really carrying forward.
Right, that's a good note to end on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.